After wiping the human race off the face of the earth, food became the dominant species on the planet, and now they have to learn to live in a society where everything is allowed. Today we're going to recap the first season of the series, Sausage Party, Foodtopia, from 2024. During the Great Food Riot, led by Barry the Sausage, the humans were finally defeated and Bill became one of the last survivors. Alone, the glutton eliminates all the cans of booze, so Frank sends a troop of spaghetti to attack him, but he defeats his opponents with a bath of hot water. In a last-ditch attempt to win the war, Barry enlists the help of Sammy, who has just lost his best friend, to get close to Bill and throws a mini umbrella at the man's throat. After eliminating all their predators, the foodies decide to create their own reign and name that city Foodtopia, a place where food can live completely free from humans. That afternoon, the foodies throw a party to celebrate their victory, but during the celebration, heavy clouds approach the city and the food begins to melt when it comes into contact with the water. Desperate, they run through the streets in search of shelter, and Brenda is about to be hit by a raindrop when Barry and Frank show up and use plastic wrap to protect her. Together, the food runs back to the supermarket and many of them end up being brutally eliminated during the escape. Suddenly, everyone hears a loud roar of water and realizes that a flood is approaching. At this point, the food ends up being hit and is submerged, but Barry and his friends manage to take shelter inside the package and are carried away by the current. In an attempt to save as much food as possible, the sausage climbs aboard a packet of snacks and rescues his friends who are floating in the water. Seeing the food being sent straight into the sewer, Gum uses his wheelchair to approach the entrance and stretches out to cover the passage, helping his friends onto the sidewalk. After being rescued, Frank tries to pull the Gum to safety, but his body ends up breaking in half and he can't survive. When the storm comes to an end, chaos begins to reign in Foodtopia, as the food is afraid of what is to come. While Barry prepares a search party to rescue the injured, Brenda and Frank try to reassure the survivors, but they all decide to return to the supermarket, as they believe that inside is the safest place they can be. Realizing that the food is about to give up its freedom, the couple tries to convince them that this is a bad idea, but both are completely ignored. Over the next few hours, Barry devotes all his energy to gathering up the victims he finds scattered around the park and lays them all out on a towel. However, when he steps away to help a seriously injured donut, the sausage realizes that all the other food has disappeared and soon discovers that not all humans have been eliminated. Upon returning to Foodtopia, Barry asks his friends to help him close the donut's wound, as he has been bitten and lost a lot of jam. When they discover that there is a human alive nearby, Brenda and Frank celebrate because, despite hating humans, the couple know that only they can explain where the water that wiped out half the food in that supermarket came from. After the storm, the food decided to go back on the shelves, even though the place was completely destroyed and the roof could collapse at any moment. To prevent his friends from being crushed, the sausage has to find that human and guarantees that, as soon as he gets the answer he's looking for, he'll eliminate him with his bare hands. With the help of Brenda and Frank, Barry builds a boat to go after the man, and the team follows the clues scattered along the riverbank to try and find him. After several hours following footprints and food trails left behind, the trio manage to find him in the middle of the forest next to a box full of food. Immediately, Brenda throws a bath salts bomb to allow the man to communicate with them, and, while Barry frees the prisoners, Frank tries to extract information about the storm. When asked who is making the water fall from the sky, Richie feels confused and tries to fend off the attack. Then, when he realizes that his friends are in danger, Barry takes a knife to cut his enemy's tendons and Richie ends up falling into the fire. Minutes later, his two friends arrive at the camp and are also attacked, but they grab their weapons to defend themselves. While Donnie attacks the food with his axe, Jack panics and hides in the bushes. Then Barry breaks into the man's pants and starts to control him. No longer in control of his own body, Jack brutally strikes his friend and Donnie tries to understand what is going on. In order not to be eliminated, the man has to attack his companion and tries to hit him with the axe, but he ends up being hit by the blade and can't survive. Seeing his two friends eliminated, Jack realizes that he won't be able to defeat his enemies alone, so he decides to cooperate with them. Meanwhile, in the supermarket, the ceiling begins to collapse and the shelves end up falling on top of the food. When they realize that the place is collapsing, they all try to run out, but the exit is blocked by a giant clock and they end up trapped inside. Just then, Jack appears and, under Barry's command, opens the way for the food to escape. Even though the roof is collapsing, the survivors refuse to go outside because they are afraid of the water falling from the sky. In an attempt to reassure them, Jack says that the rain only comes when the dark clouds appear. As the sky is blue and sunny, there is no risk of a storm. Upon hearing this, The foodies feel more confident about leaving the store and the supermarket collapses as soon as everyone has left. Now that his friends are safe again, Barry begins to think of ways to get rid of that human and Sammy advises him to create a spectacle to eliminate him in front of the public. As all the food is looking for a place to live, Brenda decides to do the same and invites Frank to live with her in a treehouse. While the couple are celebrating in their new home, the other foodies are competing to choose their homes, as there aren't enough establishments in the city for each of them. The next morning, Barry begins preparations for the music festival, where Jack will be sacrificed. While Sammy and his team of judges select all the contestants who will perform, Velasca is devoured by a bird and all the food must flee so as not to become the next victims. Seeing his friends being devoured, Barry decides to take action and uses a radio antenna as a springboard to reach the crow. However, it's not long before the sausage is knocked over, so Brenda and Frank decide to ask the human for help, in exchange for water to quench his thirst. Jack reveals how to scare the bird away and the foodies erect a scarecrow to get rid of the animal. When they realize that the human's plan has worked, the couple begins to think that it might not be a good idea to get rid of him, since their people might need Jack's help in the future. However, Barry refuses to spare his enemy's life and throws fuel on the stage to set it on fire during the show. To prevent their only source of information from being eliminated, Frank and Brenda decide to replace Jack with another human body, so that no one will notice that the man has disappeared. At the end of the music festival, Barry lights a match to set fire to the rope that leads to the stage where Jack is tied up. When she realizes that the fire is about to burn down the stage, Brenda throws a small amount of earth on it to put it out. Minutes later, Barry realizes what has happened and rushes to rekindle the fire, so Brenda has to run to free Jack while Frank puts the other human in his place. At that moment, the entire wooden stage goes up in flames and Barry's eyes light up as he sees yet another human being cruelly eliminated. Meanwhile, the couple take Jack to the treehouse and tie him up so that he can't escape. Since he hasn't eaten for several hours, the man claims to be starving and now Frank and Brenda have to find a way to feed him without putting their friends' lives in danger. As there are not enough shelters for each individual, the food is divided into categories to occupy the stores and the canned goods go to live in the toy store. After losing a fight with the tuna can, Bean has to hand over a human tooth to his opponent as payment. Just then, Julius appears and says he wants to buy that fortress. The orange one offers 107 teeth as payment and immediately the canned goods accept the offer, leaving the whole store to him. Before long, teeth become the most precious currency in Foodtopia and the foodstuffs start fighting each other to steal them from each other. As they have a human to feed, Brenda and Frank have to think of a solution so as not to let him starve. Since they're not willing to sacrifice any of their friends, they offer Jack human flesh without Barry finding out. In an attempt to keep his partner busy, Frank gives him a mission, as the town needs a sheriff to stop the tooth thefts. While the sausage is distracted, the couple take the human foot to the treehouse, but Jack initially refuses to eat it. That afternoon, Barry assembles a team of police officers who are tasked with maintaining order in the city and investigating all crimes. After capturing the thieves, Barry and his team take them all to the food court, where the criminals will be tried. Observing the food accused of stealing her teeth, Brenda notices a pattern and soon discovers that all the thieves committed their crimes in order to pay for their survival. The truth is that Julius has monopolized all the freezers in the city, so if they want to cool off, the inhabitants have to pay him for a tooth. Otherwise, they'll rot in the heat. In a few hours of freedom, the food was divided into different social classes and the poorest live on the outskirts of the city without any assistance. In an attempt to solve this problem, Brenda and Frank break into Sammy's show, who has now become a famous comedian, to deliver a message to the locals. The couple suggests that the foods that have the most teeth share this resource with the other foods so that everyone can enjoy a comfortable life. However, upon hearing this, Julius takes a stand against this idea and suggests that a vote be held so that the inhabitants of Foodtopia can choose a representative to govern them. Immediately, the residents agree with this idea and Sammy says that the vote will take place on the next show. When he realizes the trouble he's in, Frank begins to think of a solution and decides to prepare his candidacy speech. The next day, during the debate, the sausage says that if he is elected as president of Foodtopia, he and his girlfriend will guarantee equality for all foods. However, during their speech, the couple ends up being handcuffed because Julius paid the police to help him get elected. When his opponents are removed from the stage, Orange takes the microphone to begin his manipulation speech and guarantees that he will use all his fortune to guarantee employment for all the city's residents. According to Julius, if his teeth are distributed to the poorest part of the population, he won't be able to provide for his employees and they will all end up unemployed. Upon hearing this, the public begins to take a stand against Frank and Brenda, and the couple realizes that if they don't do something about it, Julius will end up being elected president. Determined to prevent this from happening, they pay Jack another visit and ask for his help in stopping the Orange from taking over. Meanwhile, Julius invites Sammy to a meeting and tries to make a deal with him. Knowing that the bagel has great influence among the locals, the candidate offers him a big TV channel if the comedian agrees to support his campaign. Having always dreamed of being famous, Sammy can't refuse the offer and ends up betraying his friends to join Julius's party. When he discovers that he has been betrayed by one of his best friends, Frank is furious and goes after the bagel in search of explanations. However, Orange interrupts the argument and gives Sammy a car as a gift as a thank you for his excellent work. Desperate to find a way to reverse this situation, Frank once again goes to the human to ask for some tips on how to carry out a robbery. That night, after dressing up as a potato, Frank steals one of the dealership's toy cars and robs a safe full of teeth to invest in his campaign. After the crime, Frank is chased by the cars and drives aimlessly around the city in an attempt to throw off the police. A few minutes later, while taking a sharp bend, the sausage ends up causing an accident and gets away from the cars. However, Barry shows up to disrupt his plans and goes after the potato without imagining that his best friend is the real robber. While trying to get rid of him, Frank crashes the vehicle into the side of a fountain and Barry is thrown into the water. At that moment, the sausage drives to the treehouse and surprises Brenda with a huge amount of stolen teeth. However, the bread is not at all happy to discover that her boyfriend has become a criminal and blames Jack for influencing Frank to make this decision. Regretting having decided to save that human's life, Brenda takes a stiletto to eliminate him, but the sausage decides to protect his new friend. When she realizes that her boyfriend would rather stick to the human than support her, Brenda feels deeply disappointed and leaves. The next morning, all the potatoes in town are taken to the police station for questioning, but Barry begins to suspect that perhaps his friend is the one really responsible for the crime. While Frank enlists Jack's help to practice his new speech, Brenda pays a visit to the residents of the suburbs to ask for votes and says she will help them build a world without social class distinctions, where everyone will have access to the resources they need. Suddenly, Barry approaches and asks the bread where Frank is. What neither of them imagines is that the sausage is building an ever deeper friendship with his human prisoner and uses Brenda's stiletto to free him. In the first few minutes of questioning, the bread confesses to Barry that she swapped Jack's body for a perished one on the day of the concert and apologizes for lying to him. When he discovers that his friend has allied himself with the human, Barry decides to help Brenda convince him that the man can't be trusted. However, instead of listening to his friends, the sausage decides to run away with Jack into the forest, but soon realizes the big mistake he has made and returns to Foodtopia, as the public debate is about to begin. As mediator of the debate, Sammy introduces the candidates and begins the question session. However, before answering any questions, Brenda decides to speak up to inform everyone that she is running for president alone, as Frank and she don't share the same ideologies. Furious at having been betrayed and determined to collect all the votes that would have gone to her former partner, Brenda decides to tell everyone that Frank has befriended a human and can no longer be trusted. The sausage immediately denies all the accusations, but his words are unable to convince voters that Brenda is lying. During the debate, the ex-couple end up getting into a violent fight in front of the public, and this leads to Julius receiving more and more support from the public to take over the presidency. At the end of the vote, the orange one ends up being elected by an overwhelming majority of votes, and all Brenda and Frank's chances are completely destroyed. The next morning, on his first day as Foodtopia's highest authority, all Julius can think about is how to further grow his empire at the expense of the poorest, who are rotting in the city's alleys. When he realizes what a big mistake he's made by betraying Brenda and Barry's trust, Frank apologizes and says he'll get rid of the human. Although she is still deeply hurt by the sausage, Brenda decides to forgive him and they manage to get back together. Even after losing her candidacy, the baguette remains determined to fight for the rights of all the inhabitants of Foodtopia and has the help of her boyfriend to achieve this. That afternoon, Frank returns to the forest to find Jack, and Barry goes after him. Seeing his friend and the human talking, the sausage decides to eliminate the predator once and for all. However, when he realizes that Frank is suffering from sending the man away, Barry gives up the attack because he realizes that they have built a true friendship. Thrilled by this scene, when he returns to the city, Barry decides to go after Sammy to try to make amends, but the bagel isn't willing to rebuild that friendship. Instead of listening to what the sausage has to say, Sammy orders him to leave, as he is now surrounded by luxury cars and new friends. Meanwhile, Brenda breaks into an air duct to get to Julius's quarters and discovers that the president has been taken prisoner. Orange claims to be controlled by a small grain of rice, which helped him take over the presidency in order to take revenge on all the inhabitants of Foodtopia. After the war against the humans, Rice lost all her friends in the flood and ended up stuck to a pole. Seeing Julius approaching, the little girl begged for help, but no one came to her rescue. When she finally managed to free herself, she went back to the market with the other food, but soon realized that things weren't as they used to be. Not only was there no unity among the food, but everyone was willing to go over each other's heads to get along. Since it was so small, the grain of rice knew it had no chance of surviving, so when Barry showed up controlling the human, Rice assumed she could do the same with other food. At that moment, she decided to invade Julius's body and has controlled him ever since. In this way, Rice went from being the most vulnerable food in town to the most powerful. So when Brenda and Frank came up with the idea of distributing wealth equally to all, the grain of rice realized that its sovereignty was at stake and decided to stand for election. Now that Brenda knows his secret, Rice decides to eliminate her and invades his host's body to fulfill this mission. However, when she realizes that her life is at risk, the bread hits Julius with strong punches and attacks him with a padlock. However, during the fight, Rice manages to fight back and controls Julius's body so that he throws Brenda into the food crusher. Luckily, the baguette manages to hold onto the tap and pulls Julius into the sink with it. In the meantime, Rice manages to escape and turns on the tap to eliminate her opponent. Minutes later, Frank shows up at the office looking for his girlfriend and discovers that Brenda has lost half her body. Due to the serious injury, the bread can't survive, but at least she has the chance to say her last words to her beloved. After losing his girlfriend, Frank is arrested as a suspect and sent to the police station. The next day, all the residents of Foodtopia are informed of the bread's perishment and build a statue in her honor. When he is tasked with breaking the news to the whole town that Frank was responsible for Brenda's elimination, Sammy decides to quit his job because he doesn't believe that his friend was capable of hurting his girlfriend. So Julius decides to replace him and puts Duncan in his place to pass on the news. After being found guilty, Frank is sentenced to elimination and will be eliminated in the public square. Just then, Sammy spots Barry in the crowd and approaches him to try to make peace with him. Together, they pay one last visit to their friend in jail and claim to know that Frank would never be able to eliminate Brenda. In an attempt to free his friend from prison, Barry starts looking for evidence that Frank is innocent and meets a wrinkled sausage who reveals that he filmed Brenda minutes before her perishment. Through the video, Barry discovers that it was Julius who attacked the bread, as he was being controlled by Rice. After getting all the evidence they need, the two friends take out the cell phone and decide to break into the electronics store to broadcast the images to everyone in town. This seems like an impossible mission for a bagel and sausage, so Barry decides to go after Jack for help. When he learns that his friend is about to be executed, the man promptly offers to help save him and returns to Foodtopia. In front of all the inhabitants, Julius orders the policemen to light the grill to roast the criminal. Meanwhile, Jack helps Sammy and Barry break into the electronics store and the pair post the video that proves who the real criminal is. When she is unmasked, Rice is furious and knocks down the canning tower so that Frank falls into the coals. While the sausage is trying to get out of the grill, Barry and the other food knock over the grill and Frank manages to survive, despite suffering some burns. Barry then goes after Rice and Julius runs away to avoid being captured. However, the sausage manages to catch up with him and captures the cursed grain of rice that was responsible for causing all the chaos. Furious, Barry tries to break Rice in half, but Frank knows that's not what his girlfriend would want, so he decides to forgive her. In this way, the sausage encourages all the residents to become more united in order to build a better city for everyone, because that was Brenda's goal. At that moment, the crow appears and catches the grain of rice, which ended up having the end it deserved. That night, Frank returns alone to the treehouse and begins to think of a solution to get Foodtopia back on track, as there will now be a new election. With Jack's help, the sausage begins a forceful takeover of the leadership and assumes power without being elected in a vote. In this way, he believes he will be able to create a fairer society and finally fulfill his beloved's great dream. So what did you think of this series? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more series recaps. See you next time.